Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to cross the Øresund and we're going to go back to Copenhagen in Denmark, and we've got another new Danish brewery to introduce you to on the channel here for the first time. So I'm really curious to see how this particular beer turns out. So for this one then we are going to go to Hvidovre, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is to the southwest of the central part of Copenhagen, and we're reviewing my first beer from Slowburn Brewing Cooperative. So this one is the Shoulders of Giants, a West Coast IPA coming in at 6.3% ABV. And this is supposed to be a pretty nice beer actually, so I'm very curious to see how it turns out. As of February 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have 5 different cans available. The 3 of the other ones are New England hazy style IPAs. They also have an Italian style Pilsner as well, which I did manage to try with Simon Friend, who was in who recommended me one of the beers at the Mikkeller Bauhauen Wild Ale celebration. You would have seen him if you watched that festival video, and we tried it and both thought it was really nice, so I think that's the next beer I'm going to have to review from these guys. But as I've been saying, I've been missing my West Coast IPAs, so this is the one that really kind of caught my eye when I saw these in Kiosk actually. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one, but I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can add from Slowburn Brewing. This is the very first time I'm reviewing one of their beers for you on the channel, as I mentioned, but it definitely won't be the last. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, which is pretty regularly because I live close to Copenhagen. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated, and I do enjoy introducing new Danish breweries to you on the channel as well. So anyway, on to the history part of the video then. Slowburn Brewing. So Slowburn Brewing, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Hvidovre, which is to the kind of southwest of the central part of Copenhagen. Probably pronouncing that wrong because Danish, you know, it's very easy for me as a Swedish speaker to read Danish, but to try and pronounce it is impossible. But this brewery was founded back in 2018 by Amelie Knage, Stefano Irene and Andrew Keaton. So Amelie is Danish, and she worked at Mikkeller's Olen Brewed Bar as well as at Kiosk, where this beer was bought, and she also started one of the first kombucha breweries in Copenhagen, which is called Hvidovre Kombucha. She's still active in that today, but over time she gradually moved into home brewing beer after she had basically tried a lot of the craft beers that were available in Copenhagen, and as we know, there is a hell of a good selection over there. But now she assists in the brewing. She's the assistant brewer basically, and she also manages the sales and distribution side of the brewery. Stefano, on the other hand, is the head brewer. He's originally from Milan in Italy. He studied biotechnology at university, and he went on to work at Birrificio Rurale in Italy before moving to Denmark to work for White Labs Yeast Tour, a very well-known worldwide yeast company actually, and he also worked at the Fermentoren beer bar as well, which is just down the street from Kiosk on Esplanaden. Andrew, on the other hand, the final of the 3 owners, he's originally from the US, and he moved to Copenhagen back in 2010 when the Nordic beer scene was still very much in its infancy, but he comes from a background in software engineering and development. He deals with the finance side of the brewery, also the social media side of things as well, and he does a little bit of experimentation with sour beers and barrel aging as well. He was quite a keen home brewer from what I understand too. So a multinational team of people behind the brewery, 1 Dane, 1 Italian and one American, and as of February 2020, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've apparently produced 17 different kinds of beers. About 12 of them have only been available on tap from what I understand. 5 of them are in the cans. Like I said, this is one. They've got 3 New England IPAs, and they have the Italian style Pilsner as well, which I think will probably be my next review that I do from them. So yeah, that's all I'm really able to tell you about Slowburn Brewing Cooperative for the moment. If you want to learn more, of course, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. They are fairly active on there, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about the different beers that they've done. But they do have quite a a good how do you say, a good page for all the different beers that are in the cans on the website. Actually, I think the ones that are put on tap are the kind of experimental ones that they'll maybe bring out a little bit later on. But yeah, as I say, all you need to know about them, check them out if you get the chance. I was impressed with the Pilsner that we tried, so I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So yeah, let's see how we go with this one then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open up. There you can see it is really, really nicely presented. There's, you know, they all have this lovely kind of white background and then almost like oil painting, and it's a combination of like oil painting and drawing actually, but although it's probably designed on a computer these days. But yeah, really lovely labels on this one, I have to say. This one, like I said to you, it comes in at 6.3% ABV. The hops in this one are a bit old school. It's got Columbus, which is most likely the bittering hop, Chinook, which could be either, in fairness. Big piney resinous grapefruity sort of thing, Simcoe, which is the kind of classic passion fruit hop, and we also have a little bit of Amarillo, which is a lovely kind of oily orange character rather. So yeah, this one strikes me as if it's going to be a really classic old school West Coast IPA, so I'm very, very curious to see how this one turns out. And as I mentioned, Simon and I were both quite impressed with the pills that we tried in Barabara, the bar of the Kiosk bottle shop actually, which I do recommend that you get, that you go and visit if you get the chance and you're in Copenhagen. But let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the taste, and I'm really curious to see what this particular beer has in store for us. The Shoulders of Giants, a West Coast IPA, coming in at 6.3% ABV. So it looks the part, you know, we'll just put, it's not going to go too crazy I think. We'll stick it all on the glass, you know, because it fits. There we are. Oh, and some of the nice Simcoe and the Simcoe passion fruit and the Amarillo orange are striking me there right now. So yeah, lovely big oily fruits coming out of this beer. So as you can see, and as you would expect from a West Coast IPA, this one's poured a nice kind of rich amber colour. It's not the darkest of ambers that I've come across from a West Coast IPA before, but you know, it does have that little bit of haze that you expect of the West Coast IPA, but obviously nowhere near as hazy as some of the New England ones that you're going to come across. You could see that there was a solid 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head on this one. Maybe should have just poured a little bit less on this one before we put it in the glass. You know, I maybe got a bit excited because it's a West Coast IPA. 440ml can, of course, but one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, quite a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But let's have a little look at that aroma and see how we get on then. There's nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of appearance, but I would say that it's one of the lighter coloured West Coast IPAs that I've come across before. So yeah, let's look at that aroma then. Oh yeah, right, straight away it's the oranges that jump out of this one at you, the big Amarillo oily orange notes. I mean, these days when it comes to the New England IPAs, Amarillo's being replaced a lot with the likes of Mosaic, and you've also got Sabro is starting to come into the game now. Waiti and Pacifica were always the New Zealand orangey versions of hops, but Amarillo for me still remains one of my favourite. I love the big oily orangey IPAs, and Amarillo really is a firm favourite when it comes to the West Coast IPAs. The big oily orangey character that it gives you is just awesome. Yeah, that really sticks out for me on this. Underneath that you can pick out like little hints of darker tropical fruit notes. You do get a wee bit of the sort of passion fruity and grapefruity notes. The grapefruit will most likely be coming from the Chinook, of course, and the passion fruit most likely for the Simcoe. But to me, it's really the oranges, the big oily oranges, that kind of dominate the aroma here. Yeah, it smells really nice, this actually. It's got that lovely sweet malt base to it as well that you expect of this style. Coming back to something like this is a little bit of nostalgia. I mean, I've explained on the channel before that hardcore IPA, which obviously is a bit heavier than this, it was always one of my kind of favourite kind of West Coast type IPAs. That was the one I kind of got into the style with Brewdog when I was studying chemistry back in Aberdeen. So to come to beers like this, and you know, to try like, you know, Sculpin and the Torpedo and all of these kind of things, you know, the classic West Coast IPAs, this is a style that I just really love, and it's nice to see that more and more breweries are starting to bring this back a little bit. and get the West Coast IPAs out there too, because the haze craze is, you know, it's fine, but you do want a little bit of variety. Sometimes you do want a beer that's a little bit more bitter than 30 IBUs. But yeah, this one does smell quite classic actually. Lovely big oily oranges, a little bit of tropical fruit in the background. Yeah, it's quite, for me this is quite straight up, it's quite a straight shooter. There's not too much in the way of fruity complexity to this. But underneath that, you do get some of the green elements of the hops. It's got a good little bit of grassiness to it, this one for me. I'm surprised that the piney resins aren't a little bit more kind of prominent in the aroma. To me it strikes me as a bit more kind of floral. And Columbus, it's a very kind of classic bittering hop, if you like. It gives you a really distinctive kind of spicy note, but the piney resins and the floral notes, you get a little bit of them, but they're not really jumping out the glass out at you like you might expect, to be honest. So that's a kind of interesting point about this beer. And it is fairly fresh as well, so that's an interesting thing. So yeah, in terms of the malt base then, getting something in my throat there. So in terms of the malt base with this then, you've got a lovely kind of smooth bready note to it. You can pick that up underneath, but you have got that big sweeter kind of caramelly quality. There's a little bit of a biscuity note to this beer as well, which is nice. I mean, it's very kind of straight up. There's maybe one or two little woody and grainy undertones to it, but as I say, mainly this has everything you would expect of the sort of West Coast. It has everything you'd expect of a West Coast IPA. It strikes me as being a really nice big oily beer, this one, so I'm really curious to see what it has in store for us. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma. This one for me, it really is a little bit nostalgic. It takes me back to the days of when Punk IPA was a good beer. So yeah, it really reminds me of that a little bit. A classic kind of hop bill on this one, which is really quite nice. So yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma. That's always half the experience with craft beer, sakes and whiskies and things, but we're going to have a taste of this one now. So this one is the Shoulders of Giants, a West Coast IPA from Slowburn Brewing Cooperative in Hvidovre, if I'm pronouncing that right, in Copenhagen over in Denmark. Let's get stuck into this one, my first review from these guys. Slange, skål, cheers. That's nice. Yeah, I like this. It's funny because, as I say, I love my West Coast IPAs. And, you know, we're used to big, thick mouthfeels these days from, you know, the double New Englands and stuff like this. It's quite strange to go back to the West Coast IPAs where they come across a bit more clean and a little bit more oily, because it really, these days when I review the West Coast IPAs, they just seem a hell of a lot lighter to me than they used to. They used to feel quite a bit thicker and more oily than I remember them now. And it's interesting how your palate can change like that when you're drinking different things. The other thing you do have to remember about the Nordic beers, in my experience as well, is that they've got very good quality water here. It's the same back home in Scotland, and I first encountered it even more so with the Icelandic beers that I reviewed years ago. They do have this very kind of clean mouthfeel to them just because of how good the water up here is for brewing beer. So to me this one comes across as, it's got a nice oily note to it, but it's got that kind of cleanliness to it as well. It really feels like a nice clean and crisp beer at the same time. But yeah, that's a solid take on the West Coast IPA, so thumbs up to Slowburn for this one. It doesn't strike me as being as bitter as some of the ones that I've had previously, but you know, people are used to lower bitterness these days, so in some ways that kind of makes sense. It's got all the flavours and things that you would expect though, and you do get a little bit more bitterness the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, let's try and break this flavour down a little bit. It's a good beer, so that's a good start for us, but let's try and break this flavour down a little bit and explain it. So yeah, middle of your palate then, you can feel a little bit of that pale malty kind of bready quality. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. But the malt base in this one to me feels very smooth, but at the same time really nice and oily. If you go into the centre of your palate, that's where you get the sweet kind of caramel notes out of this beer, and it's sitting on top of that breadiness, but even the breadiness is very, very smooth in this one. I'd be curious to know what malt varieties they've used in this, whether it would be, you know, German malts, or whether they would have brought in like some crystal or something like that, or maybe even a bit of Maris. I don't think it's Maris Otter, in fairness, because some of the grainy notes that you would get from that aren't there. But I'd be curious to know whether it is American malts or European malts that they've used in this. I'm not sure how many malteries there are over in Denmark right enough, but the smoothness in the malt base here is really nice, and the oiliness that sits on top of that to give you the proper West Coast backbone is really very nice. So like I say, if you go to the centre of your palate, you've got a thicker kind of caramelly flavour to this one. As you move further out from it, it gets a little bit more kind of biscuity and grainy, and then as you move a bit forward on it, if you go to the front corners of your palate and move in a little touch, you'll get a few wee woody undertones to this one, and there's a bit of graininess to this beer as well. When you go further into the aftertaste, you can feel the middle of your palate drying out as well, and that's sort of assisted by the bitterness that you get from the hops in this beer too. But yeah, this is good. That malt base is really nicely done. I'd love to see how they would do, because they've got, this is a lower alcohol IPA. I mean, it's not the lowest alcohol West Coast IPA you're going to come across, right enough, but these days the kind of standards for an IPA tends to be about 6.5 actually. I'd love to see these guys brew, you know, a big like 8.2 or something like that, because they've got the malt base of this one just pretty, like, really perfect in this one. So I'd be very curious to see how they do a West Coast double IPA actually. Maybe that can be another project for them. And that's another thing to point out about this brewery, is the beers that they have produced so far, as I remember, were all on the light end of the spectrum. I don't think they've tried like stouts and porters or Schwarzbiers and things like that actually. So that's an interesting point to make about these guys as well. I look forward to seeing them experiment a little bit more, because the Pilsner that I tried was very good. It was an Italian style Pilsner, so a little bit more hoppy, and it was really very nice. And this is a very solid West Coast IPA as well. So the styles that they are putting out there, they have pretty solidly done. So I'll need to try one of the hazies to see what it's like as well, obviously. But yeah, let's look at the hoppy side of things then. So, back corners of the palate, you've got a little teeny bit of earthiness there. I think that's most likely to come from both the Columbus and the Chinook. But as you come further forward along the sides of the palate, it's got a nice kind of spicy, floral aromatic kind of quality to it. You've got a big kind of piney resin note there. But it's not as big as you might get from some of them, but it does give you a good little bit of bitterness. But almost as you just cross the front corners of your palate and go round the curve of the tongue, it gets a little bit lighter and more grassy in my mind. Then behind the front curve of the palate, you've got that nice big oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. And this one, it has the big oily fruitiness that you would expect of the West Coast IPA. So yeah, if you go towards the back of that oily bubble there, you do get a little bit of that darker kind of grapefruity note, which will be the Chinook. As you come further forward, it sort of mellows out a little bit and becomes more kind of passion fruity. But I'm finding, again, the fruitiness, when you have the beer on your tongue, it really leans towards that nice big oily orange which comes from the Amarillo, which is nice that. But then as you go further into the aftertaste, the floral bitterness and the piney resins, they start to push their way out on the side of the palate a little bit, and you get some of these darker kind of tropical fruits pushing their way out of this beer as well. So that's a really interesting point to make about this one. It's in the aftertaste that you really get the big bitterness out of this. When I first took it in, I was thinking it's not the most bitter of West Coast IPAs, but you do get a little bit more bitterness out of it the further that you go into the aftertaste. But they've got the mouthfeel spot on, I think, and they've got the kind of flavour profile of this one really solid as well in my mind. So thumbs up to Slowburn Brewing Cooperative on this. They've pulled off a really solid take on one of my favourite beer styles. So in terms of the mouthfeel then, because that's the last thing we need to talk about, I'd say that it's kind of a mid-bodied beer, this one. I think it's fair to say that. So yeah, carbonation on this one is really smooth. It leans towards the oily side of things. It does feel a bit wet as well, and I think that's down to the quality of water that you've got in here. You've got a nice level of bitterness to this. I think this one's probably about 50 IBUs. I would be surprised if it's higher than that, to be honest. It's not the most bitter of West Coast IPAs that you're going to come across, and I can understand why they do that, because people are used to the sort of 30 IBU mark, 30-ish IBU mark these days that you'll get with the New England hazy IPAs, but it does have a little bit more, which is what you want from this style, and it's got a nice big kind of oily but also quite smooth malt base to it. The further you go into the aftertaste, like I said, it dries out, but you get a really nice oily fruitiness from this beer as well. It really is a solid take on the West Coast IPA, this one. I'd love to see what they would do, as I said, with you know, a sort of 8.2%-ish double West Coast IPA, because they've got this one pretty damn solid, I think. So yeah, if you're missing this style, have a go at it. If you like things like, you know, Sculpin and you know, the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and stuff like this, this one really is a pretty solid take on it. It's very classic, actually. Not quite as classic as Sierra Nevada Pale, which I think is just straight up Cascade and stuff, right enough. But yeah, this one really is a very solid take on what seems to be a bit of a forgotten style these days, actually, so it is nice to see a new brewery having a go at one of these. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Have a go at this beer for yourself and see what you think. If you are a fan of the West Coast IPAs, I think you will quite enjoy this one. I'm not sure how widely distributed this is. I'm not sure if it's still only Denmark. I'm filming this in February 2020, as I mentioned. But I think these guys, if they keep brewing beers like this and introduce a few more kind of styles and things like that, and obviously they've got some sour beers coming out at some point as well, I would guess, then I think they've got a good future ahead of them. I think they only started releasing their beers just after the summer in 2019, actually, so their beers have only been out for a couple of months, so we'll need to see where this brewery goes. But yeah, this one was the Shoulders of Giants, a 6.3% West Coast IPA from Slowburn Brewing Cooperative in Hvidovre, rather, to the southwest of Copenhagen in Denmark. A really nice take on this style, and I think the next one I review is either going to be one of their hazies or the Italian Pilsner, so keep an eye out for those reviews. I'll need to get one of these the next time I go over to Copenhagen in Denmark. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on the beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Slowburn Brewing Cooperative as well. We will definitely return to this brewery at some point soon. Check out my social media. Thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you guys very, very soon. This is the Shoulders of Giants, a 6.3% West Coast IPA from Slowburn Brewing Cooperative in Hvidovre, Copenhagen, Denmark. Slàinte, skål, catch you guys soon.